Creating a successful fintech is super tough. I've been fortunate enough to be part of the journey for 2 fintech unicorns, and I've become obsessed with cracking the code. Join me and my guests, all experts in their domain, as we attempt to find the secrets and share them with you. Welcome to the Hive Mind. So, you might notice that we're in a studio, so season 2 of the Fintech Hive Mind is now coming live. I'm with my guest, Christian Nentwich, the former CEO and founder of Duco. Christian first came to my attention with his very catchy LinkedIn phrase, the kind of founder with exits. And we've had some great exchanges on what it means to build fintech and technology businesses. So, Christian, thank you very much for joining us here today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's going to be fun.
Great. So I think one of the best things about talking to founders is you get to peel the onion back on what the real experience is of starting a company. Now, can you tell us a little bit about when you started Duco? What led to that?
It's funny, right? Because starting a company is quite easy. You pay 20 quid and now you're a founder and you have a company, and then you have years to regret your decisions, right? Yeah, Duco, I have a technical background, right? So Duco was founded on some sort of tech ideas, right? Things I observed in the financial services industry that were, tremendously inefficient around data, people doing hundreds of thousands of people doing sort of manual work you wouldn't expect, and then coming up with new algorithms to solve some of these problems, and then sort of going for it, right? So it was a bottom-up tech type thing, right? But it was around a specific problem, and the problem was, why do we have so many people sitting around reconciling, systems in Excel in financial services? Because that's a multi-billion-dollar problem, and it shouldn't exist, right?
So when you set the business up, were you a founder determined to start a business, looking for a problem to solve, or did you just become aware of this issue and it was like an itch that you felt that you had to scratch ultimately?
So I can honestly say I've never sort of sat around in my life and said, I want to be an entrepreneur or want to run a business, right? I mean, it was, I want to solve this problem, right? And in many ways, you sometimes see that people have that motivation. I really want to run a business. I find that a very secondary motivation, right? What's the real motivation here, right? And often people like that struggle when it really gets hard. So no, we were determined to solve this problem, and we saw it in one customer, 2 customers. Then we're like, okay, well, maybe this is real, right? Maybe we should go for this, right? And we went for it.
Great. And the story of a pivot is, almost overused to the point of being trite now. Did you get the product market fit right first time? How much iteration did you have to go through on your journey?
Yeah, no, we definitely pivoted, right? So there was one very big pivot. I had a co-founder originally, Michael Marconi. The 2 of us, we built an initial product, but it was a product that we built for IT departments to solve some of these problems, right? And as we sort of went through this, we realized that we really had no passion for things that sort of run as a black box somewhere, and we wanted to serve business users, right, on the screen. And we thought, the way we're going about this isn't going to work for us. It was also installed software. So together with some investors we said, look, why don't we ditch all this and build a SaaS service, right? That works for the business, where people can self-serve and just solve these problems themselves. So that was a big pivot, because we already had $500,000 in revenue or so, and we just ditched that. We're like, we're going to churn this, right? We're going to build a new thing from scratch. And then the second big pivot was when, because we were SaaS from day one, and SaaS in financial services in 2013 was really hard, right? Nobody wanted to be first and send us the data. And sort of banging our heads against the wall for 2 years trying to sell to the big banks. And then we pivoted and we're like, okay, we're going to pick a subsegment of smaller firms, and we're going to start there. And that really unlocked then we signed up like 20 customers in year 1 or something, and we went from there.
So what you're describing, I suppose, is the importance of going after a niche. And do you think that was something that was important to you, or, if any other founders are listening, is that a universal rule that you would take with you?
Absolutely. I think I would die on that hill, right? Especially if you have a broad platform that has lots of applicability. You don't conquer the world sort of in one go. You go one village at a time, right? So the bowling alley strategy, or the bowling pin strategy, or whatever we're going to call it, from crossing the chasm, I'm a huge fan of that, right? So you pick one small segment where you understand the customer extremely well, you know exactly what the value add is. There has to be a compelling event for that particular segment as well to create change. Go after that, win it all, right? And then go for the next one. So it took us a couple of years to figure out how to really do this, because it's against your nature in a way. You want to solve all the big problems in one go. But once we got it going, it really worked well.
What I love about that is it reminds me of a fantastic video by a CEO called Dave McJanet. He does infrastructure for Terraform, and he talked about picking your market. And he gave the example of the data warehouse market and Snowflake picking the cloud data market. And it reminds me of what you're saying. It was, you know, to someone listening, it maybe sounds trivial. It was an on-prem versus a SaaS, but that's a completely different market that you entered at that point, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you say the cloud, the warehouse market, or one of these big platform markets, right? Or, you know, tools like, you know, Tableau, right? Where I know some of the history of these guys. So you think, okay, here's a great analytics tool that can really visualize all your stuff, blah, blah, blah. That's not how you sell it, right? That's not how you sell it at scale, right? The way you sell it at scale is you find a real problem, right? Maybe it's, you know, maybe it's analytics for logistics companies that have a particular problem, right, and that need better visualization and insight on that problem. And almost everybody has to verticalize eventually, right? So even if the tech is horizontal, the go-to-market ends up vertical sooner or later, right? And that's true for, you know, Snowflake and everybody else, and even Amazon, right? Web services, everybody has vertical divisions over the top. And I think it's so important because you need to speak the language of the customer, right? And, you know, your FS customer doesn't want to hear about your logistics use cases, right? They'll just think, what the hell, you know, you don't know anything about me, right? So the art is to be a chameleon and to appear to everybody the way they want to see you, right?
And when you started your business, can you talk us through how the go-to-market evolved? Like, how did you get your first deal and how does it move on from that point?
Well, you know this, right? I mean, going 0 to 1 is just absolute terror, right? I mean, it's founder sales, and I'm also obviously an active investor, right, in startups and growth companies, and there's just no way around this, right? This is like either the founders can crack this and find product market fit, or they can't, right? Building sales teams too early is just a huge mistake, one I made as well, right? Maybe there's a bit of groupthink for a second. Everybody goes, "Oh, we're ready, right? Let's hire a bunch of professional salespeople. Let's hire somebody to head up sales." And when it's not completely ready to hit the accelerator, it just ends so badly, right? I mean, you know, we churned off the sales team, first sales team we hired. I had to fire a whole bunch of people. It just wasn't any good. So that early stage, it's on the founders. It's on the founders to find product market fit, and then after that, actually, I think the next most important thing is amazing pre-sales people, right? If you're selling technically complex product, right?
And many are.
And many are, right? It will depend on the listeners, right? But anything that's complex, enterprise, B2B, pre-sales people, the technical sale, because that already gives the founders some ability to scale themselves. And then some salespeople, and then some sales leadership, right? Might even want to hire for a couple of salespeople without hiring a sales leader, depending on the company, and then hire a sales leader, right? Once you're sure it's going to work.
Yeah, though, I mean, the sales leaders are pretty expensive, and what you need is people helping the founder rather than managing them, especially when you're a couple of salespeople.
Well, they're here to scale repeatability, but you have to have something to repeat, right? And you have to find that first.
Yeah. And where do you stand on marketing? I mean, we saw a fairly pokey post from you on LinkedIn in the past week, sort of decrying B2B marketing as broken, which I completely agree with. But, you know, how do you see in this space of, you know, enterprise technology, what is the role of marketing today?
Yeah, that wasn't actually a dig at marketing, that post, right? It was a dig at, I think, how we use marketing as leaders in enterprise B2B, right? It wasn't that long ago, and I think genuinely in Europe, especially in many companies, it's still the case that people look at marketing and they go, "Oh, we'll do the strategy, and then we'll ask these guys to do the websites and the brochures," right? And the more we go into vertical companies, and we're all going to build more vertical companies now, because if you're horizontal, then some AI company is going to crush you, right? So we're going to have more subject matter expertise, deeper vertical specialization. And now that means maybe more complex sales. It means more subject matter expertise required. And it means that sales and marketing need to work together. And so everything that cadence from what's the product, how do you price it, who's the ideal customer, right? What thesis are we testing, and what customers are we calling in each order, right? And then what are we learning, right, as we close deals? You need real integration there. But what we've actually done is, especially in the ZERP years, right, where we had lots of money, what we've actually done is said, okay, well, marketing is actually the whole go-to-market motion, right, when you think about it. But what we said is actually, no, it's three separate things. It's product, it's sales, it's marketing. They're sitting in three separate silos, right? And we need to do that so we can scale. So we're going to specialize everybody. But, yes, you get scale, but you get disjointedness, and you don't get, unified thinking. And I think it'd be good to think about what structure should look like in the future, right? And how people work together. And I don't have all the answers, but I think it's a good thing to think about.
In terms of solving the puzzle, where did you get to? Because I think what you're highlighting is really important. When you add people and add layers, the CEO and the leadership team become abstracted from the realities, and suddenly there's a filtering or a distortion between the critical data, experiential data that they need to steer the company, and the people that make those decisions. So what did at Duco, at the point where you handed over the CEO reins, what did that look like?
You're totally right. I mean, and there's also things like empire building happen as well, right? If you don't look, so you do have to do your job, right, and stay on the ball, and figure out what people on the ground are doing, right? For me, a great executive leader has a really good direct reporting line, so they don't have to spend massive amounts of time there, and they spend their time with people on the ground, right? Talking to customers, understanding what's going on. I had marketing reporting to me and the chief revenue officer reporting to me. Actually, for me, the question mark is maybe about the role, what's the chief revenue officer, right? I think that's the real question, right? Because if you're honest about it, right, most people just hire a head of sales and call them CRO, right? And if your responsibility is the entire go-to-market motion at scale anyway, that probably seems more appropriate. But then you need people who are really good thinkers, I guess, right? As well as good in front of customers and helping to close, right? But who can really, I don't believe in people who come with a playbook, right? I believe in people who come with experience and then apply that experience and their understanding of the customer and the company to create something that works. But where I've seen it go wrong is sort of, here's the playbook, bum, 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 dial it up. Yeah, you've probably seen that as well, right? That's how lots of money gets wasted and people end up fired in the end, right?
Yeah. So would you have a CRO as a unified role responsible for sales and marketing?
I would, but then I think I would give them probably more in the future, right? In other companies, let's see. But do they look the same? I don't know, right? Could they be a CMO? They could, but a CMO is a very specific title, right? That people self-select into and self-select out of. So I think Chief Commercial Officer, CRO, that's probably the role, with broad responsibility, including strategic marketing, not just tactical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how would you select these individuals? I there's a massive thing we could talk about. I suppose it could be a rabbit hole in terms of hiring. But the reason I asked the question, I was talking to someone the other day, and they were evangelical about the role of psychometric and aptitude testing. And I just wanted to get your hot take on that issue.
I'm not a fan of aptitude testing for selecting people. I do like some of the behavioral testing in terms of making sure that, not as a selection criterion, but once you've picked somebody, making sure that you understand how they like to collaborate and how they fit into the team. So I'm a fan of that. I'm going around full circle on this, right? I mean, track record matters, right? You know, have you built something? Have you been commercially successful, right? In some environment, because these are very senior roles, and I mean, that's a big predictor, right, of what will happen. But beyond that, I think you're looking for good business people, not just functional experts, right? Especially at that level.
See, one of the things that you talked about there was about the importance of the playbook.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really interesting, particularly from you, because you're a computer scientist.
Yeah.
You know, very typically system-driven thinkers. So I would have thought the appeal of someone that comes with a set of systems is, you know, quite appealing. Is it? I'm not sure that it's an inconsistency, but do you like people that build new systems, or people that are more, I suppose you could say, spontaneous? I'm just trying to understand the...
Well, let's change the analogy, right?
Yeah.
I'd love to see somebody come in with, you know, a toolkit full of screwdrivers and hammers, and, you know, a wide toolkit, right? From, you know, how you run outbound campaigns to how you create brand awareness to, you know, how do you structure a deal team and a deal desk in an enterprise environment. And they should have that toolkit, right? But if they come in and on day one, they say, I know exactly what we need to do here, bam, 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 bam. And they don't even know what the customer's doing, right? They don't know, they're not figuring out what the company really needs in its current context. It's the undifferentiated playbook, right, that I have a real problem with, right?
Copy paste.
Yeah, copy paste. Yeah. That's a problem. Mm-hmm.
Great. So from an outbound perspective, like outbound sales, there's a lot of, I suppose it's a bit of a fashionable subject at the moment. Outbound is dead. People are more less receptive to picking up phone calls. What's your position on that?
Yeah, it's great on social media, isn't it? Outbound is dead. It sounds good, doesn't it? So it's a bit of an unsubtle statement, isn't it?
Hugely, yeah. It's clickbait, isn't it?
You have to have an outbound sales motion, right? You know, does spammy outbound marketing work? I don't think so. Not in very vertically specialized areas, right? I mean, you tell me the last time you engaged with somebody who emailed you, right? I know it's a numbers game, but I think the engagement rates are probably way down. Cold calling people, navigating accounts, getting to people who don't know you. You can't create a business without that, right? So there has to be an outbound sales motion. I don't believe that the entire outbound concept is dead. No,
I agree. But I guess the question is how it balances with marketing. I mean, I've seen a lot of businesses struggle because they essentially hire a load of salespeople, give them laptops, and say, "Go make it rain." So it's I suppose it's a question of balance. Like in terms of an overall investment, one of the conversations that we had a little while back was about the customer acquisition cost, and if that is a cost that businesses bear, and I think there's a lot of data to suggest that it's around a CAC payback period of 24 or even more months of that spend. Like, I appreciate it's going to be very different from business to business, but from your experience, how does that cost weight between more traditional sales or marketing?
I mean, the way we typically calculate CAC is all of it, right, in one go. So sales and marketing, and how much money are we making with it, which I think is right? Because at the end of the day, right, we have sales and marketing activities to create revenue, right? And how the money breaks down between them, you can have a view on that, but you've spent all that money, right? So that's what you spend to acquire customers. Now, in the inefficient periods of the last few years, over 24 months might have been okay. But right now, I just don't think that's okay, right? It's way too expensive to acquire customers like that. And what I'm seeing a lot in the companies I work with is much leaner setups. So the playbook, right, from 36 months ago would have been hire, throw lots on ads, throw lots at sequences and campaigns, create the funnel, spend all your time tracking SQL, MQL ratios, right? And sort of get that funnel going and then get sales to pick it up. And I now, a lot of us have been pushed up market, right? Selling to the SMB segment is tremendously difficult in the last few years. So a lot of companies for the first time are trying to maybe sell one level higher to the mid-market or to enterprise. And that same approach just doesn't work as well, right? It's a higher touch sale. And the type of marketing you want to do is very educational, right? It's very content driven. And you want to make sure if somebody's ready to buy in 2 years that they get your material now and that they get some engagement. And I think you pull a lot of spend, you put it into community building instead, for example, right? And into private events where you get sort of leaders in your target industry together, and it just pays off massively more than undifferentiated, spam that nobody reads. So yeah, and I mean, there is a second element to this, is which obviously as companies scale from low tens to mid tens to high tens of millions, you do then have to move away from just leads towards also brand recognition spend. You can't not do that. Enterprise-wise, the majority goes into sales ultimately, right? And probably the minority into marketing. But on both sides, what we're spending it on is changing a lot.
Mm. And did you ever have difficult conversations at Duco about attribution? The need to measure things?
Never. Oh man, yeah. Look, I try and set this up so that we avoid these conversations, because you know what? They're so unproductive. Yeah. Like, talking about attribution makes you no money, right? It's just completely irrelevant for the company. It's important to people who are incentivized personally, right, with their jobs. And there are schools of thought on this. People at Duco will know this. I hate indirect revenue attribution, right? Influenced stuff, right? I influenced the sale because it's like I'm gonna write my own check type setup, right? I was in the room when we had a meeting with this customer. Can pay me, right? So direct attribution. There's no honestly, I haven't seen a perfect system, right? But I do like to avoid indirect contribution, and if it has to be, maybe even detach the variable comp models of the two functions completely, right? To avoid that sort of unproductive argument for who did what, right?
But you're right. I think it's a solution with no answer, and the search for the answer, like it requires a little bit of intuition, can take you to a dark place. One of the favorite things that I heard a while back was Goodhart's law. Is it something that you've heard of?
No, I haven't heard that.
So when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to become a good measure.
Oh, well, that's true. Yes.
So yeah, you like the business development people that are measured on meetings. So the quality of the meetings plummets, but the volume goes up, and the same for MQL. And a lot of that is driven by the attribution, isn't it? As opposed to the North Star of we need happy customers and we need revenue.
Well, and you can always go back to that. And so when this gets so complicated and you're having so many meetings about it, you can always remember that you can pull the handbrake on this, pay people variable comp on the revenue and the profit of the entire company, and then just apply normal good performance management to the individuals, right? Because if you do that work, you can normally see who's doing a good job and who isn't. So to tie people, it's a bit like with tax, right? The more specific and fine grain you make it, the more people game it. And not because they want to game it, but because you're forcing them to game it, right? To get paid, right? Yeah.
So stepping back from, your time at Duco, you're now, what's your role at Duco now?
So my title is founder and board member. And so obviously I'm on the board. I have a pretty free role at the moment. I mean, I help with the largest customers. We promise them a lot, right? So it's really important to me that we do a good job with them, and I'm running some innovation projects, but obviously not as intense as when I was in the CEO seat. And then I have some time to help the next generation of founders, which is a pledge I've made to myself, right? Because I've had a lot of really good help along the way.
And when you did decide to step back from your CEO role, how did you make that decision? I mean, it's got to be tremendously hard. And one of the most, emotional speeches that I ever listened to was one of the co-founders of Mambu, a chap called Freddie, about his journey to decide when it was right for him to step back. What was that like for you?
That was a process, right? That isn't sort of like that's not a one-day event, right? I mean, Duco was acquired in 2021. by a private equity company. And I was then CEO for 2.5 more years, right? We did discuss during that time succession, right? We had many things on our minds, right? You know, do I want to go the next stage? Should I go the next stage? Where should the CEO of the company be? Because Duco makes a lot of money in America. And so in the end, though, you have to also like do this at the right time for the company and when the right person is available. So, you know, we took a look around together and then eventually I handed over. But because the process took quite a while, it wasn't like a shock to me, right? It wasn't like, oh, you know, I was part of the definition of what now happens to the company, which is important to me. I mean, it's my baby at the end of it, right? So a bit hard the day after, because when your diary is suddenly empty, that is really weird. That was the weirdest thing for me, right? It's like, oh, something's wrong, right? Why is my diary empty? Normally there's like 30 meetings a week in it. Now it's empty.
Did you go back into the office and everyone's like, you know, Christian, what are you doing here?
Yeah, there was a bit of that. Yeah. But there was also a lot of handover, right? So there was a reason to be there as well.
Mm. What's the thing that you miss the most from running it?
Hanging out with the people for sure, right? And you know, it's emotional. I mean, there were some emotional reactions on the people side for sure at Duco, right? Because especially people who've been there a long time, who've only sort of known me in that role. It's initially that was a shock, and I've always been very close to the people doing the work on the ground, and gone into meetings with them, and sort of also gone out and have a good time with them, and so that was a loss for me. Yeah.
How did you preserve the culture of Duco? Because I mean, from my experiences working with founders, so much of the company, I mean, it's of their flesh, comes from the founder, and without that individual, obviously, it's going to change in certain ways, and that's right. But equally, the people hired are a reflection; they're a collection of individuals with shared values. How did you safeguard that? Or
with conscious effort. So this doesn't happen by accident. There was a lot of work through all the stages: 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, 200 people, 250 people, and then I sort of tapped out at that point. But there's a lot of thinking about this. You don't keep the culture, right? You have to evolve the culture, right? There's some really core things in Duco that we always wanted to preserve. And one is, it's a very plain spoken and transparent place, right? Like we shared our cash flow with people, even when we had 4 weeks of cash left, right? We're very transparent. The thing that the board sees every month goes to the whole company, right? Maybe with some HR matters removed. And then there's some other things where, you know, from the wild days of Duco, we're like, you know, even by the time we were 50, 60 people, we're like, okay, well, maybe that part of the culture will need to now, you know, stop, right? And keep asking that question. What is it really that's really important to us, right? That we want to preserve. It gets a bit more formal over time, you know, when it's multiple locations, many people, you actually have to write that stuff down, right? You have to do the work, include everybody in that work, write it down, keep talking about it, communicate. So it's a bit like a relationship, right? It's a lot of work. It doesn't preserve itself, right?
It's strange. The process of writing down is something that I've learned later on in my career, because you learn that actually the things that you take for granted as intrinsic, whether it's culture or something else, really isn't. And particularly as you grow, that you know, documentation feels like a bit of a drag, bit of an overhead, but it's so important, isn't it? Super important.
Also, you can tell people 10 times and they still don't listen, right? So 3 more times than you thought you had to say it, right? Everything, right? And you have to say it and you have to write it, because some people don't like written content and some people don't like spoken content and some people want video. And it's actually, now I've been really fortunate, right? I've had really good executives in the company and sort of managers in the company, but communication is the hardest thing for people. This is where I always had to kick people: communicate more, communicate more, communicate more. And myself, communicate more, right? And it's never enough, right?
I think it's the same for every single person on the planet, isn't it? You always overestimate how clear you are as an individual.
Yes.
So now that you're involved in a number of projects, you said you're working with a number of other companies. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, generally, without specifics, right? I'm an LP in a number of venture and private equity funds. I'm helping some of the companies, no matter what they do in there. It's mostly technology. On the technology side, personally, there's some areas I'm personally excited about. On the AI side, code generation, right? The next generation of AI models beyond the current generation of language models. So that's super early stage stuff. Lots of opportunities still in fintech, right? And then it's about, is there a good chemistry, right, with the people, creating these companies and me, and can I help? And, I'm not particularly doing this because I need the money or anything, right? So it's just if I can make a small difference, I'll try to do that.
What do you think? I mean, when I ask what do you think are going to be the technologies that change? Obviously AI, but it's a huge umbrella. In terms of the specific use cases you talked about, fintech. Can you give us a couple of examples of really exciting developments where you think the change is going to be happening?
Yeah, I mean, so on the AI side, so I'm interested in code generation. I think, everybody's heard about GitHub Copilot, right? So that's sort of the unattended, it works with you while you're programming. I used it this year. It's amazing. I'm never going to write code without it, right? But there's also the other side of it, which is, can you automate my bug fixing, my security vulnerability patching, my migration from one cloud environment to another? Can you get me off COBOL onto a new programming language, right? Just the things I just mentioned are probably worth tens of billions of dollars, right, in TAM. And new companies are getting created in that space right now. And I think it's one of the best applications of large language models. Then beyond large language models, there are new types of networks that will work better in embedded devices, in drones, in low power scenarios that are more at the research stage that I think are super interesting. Also, I think learning and development, especially in companies, is a great use case for AI. Legal, and then obviously there's a ton of noise sort of that comes beyond that, right? But I stand by what I said before on sort of how you go to market. I want to pick an exciting use case. So I'm trying to pick exciting use cases, right? Where I think it makes a lot of sense and where the market is ready to buy.
Great.
Yeah.
And I suppose just to close us off, as a founder that's gone through Series A, B, and was it C as well?
No, just B.
Just at B. What advice would you give to a CEO fresh out of raising a Series A and a Series B?
Yeah, I mean, I hopefully the sort of CEOs that manage to raise a Series A and especially a Series B, they probably don't need to hear this, right? But maybe people who are trying to, first of all, it's kind of a meaningless event, right? You get some marketing out of it, right? But the money's in the bank and you haven't really achieved anything, right? Winning customers, creating revenue and creating an actual business is the real achievement, right? And it's always good to just keep that in mind, right? It's also not your money, right? And I've never treated investments as like I deserve this or it's my money. It's an investor's money and you owe them a return, right? So keep a lot of it in the bank, right? Don't spend it all, especially nowadays. Because nowadays, I think we're at a time where the next round might be very, very difficult no matter who you are. And you don't want to be doing down rounds ever, right? If you can avoid it, right?
I mean, it got to a point where a load of companies were raising every 12 months or even more frequently. I mean, maybe it's an arbitrary question, but how long should a well-considered funding round last, even if you are growing on plan?
Well, it's so hard to tell, right? Because there might be very legitimate reasons to raise frequently, right? But I mean, I would always, if you're planning for, say, 24 months of runway, right? With a funding round, maybe plan for 36, right? And then start raising after 18. That, I think safety first, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the question behind what would you do at Series A, you're right, it is a little bit arbitrary, but it kind of assumes that at Series A, usually they've got that indication of product market fit. Are there any in particular, different behaviors or different things that you need to do at that point?
Well, I mean, you've you've now got money to scale, right? I mean, yes, you have product market fit. I think you want to take a super hard look at your team at that point, right? It's probably not the time to be discovering for the first time how to do X, right? Depending on what you're scaling there, right? So what does the founding team now want to do, right? And it's not about giving every last person on the founding team the job they want to have, right? It's about maximizing the outcome for the company. And then also the people that are there at that point, that have reported to you at that point, are they the right people to now go, fast? I would get, and this is the only thing I always say, is if the only people on your board are investors and the founders, get someone independent on the board who's been in some operational role somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And do you think it's just a single, or would you cover those bases for, all of the main disciplines?
I think there needs to be a reason for a board member to be on the board. You can have one person who's good at the internal structure and sort of here's how you operate the company. Maybe get one who really understands your target market, who can open doors for you, right? And then if you need a special discipline, like if you're regulated, maybe you need somebody with a regulatory background, right? Or if you particularly need to scale operations, you need somebody with a large scale sort of operations background. Yeah, I think pretty functionally about that. But investors typically, especially in Europe, most of the time, investors aren't operators or not even former operators, but very good, obviously, at picking you and supporting you and helping you with exits and subsequent rounds and so on. You have the founders who are often the biggest subject matter experts, but they're inexperienced maybe at building a business. And if those two parties are the only ones on the board, then what happens is you get a lot of opinions about what should now happen, right? You stick one operator in the middle of that and the opinions stop, right? And the discussion gets very clear very quickly, right?
Brilliant. Christian, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate your time.